Okay, in this part of learning module number 10, we're going to be looking at capital financing. Okay, so the question here is, how do we get the money that we need in order to finance our long-term goals? So we've got this capital budget, we've decided we're going to purchase a van, we've decided we're going to purchase a building, whatever it may be, and we need to figure out how we're going to finance it. So the first type of financing is equity financing, and that is essentially that we're not going to take out any debt. We're just going to try and fund the project by through the cash that we have through one of a variety of what we call internal sources. So it may be that our current revenues are so high over our expenses that we can go ahead and just pay for it out of our current revenues. That'd be great. Although it might also suggest that, we're not spending enough in terms of expenses, but that's a different issue. We might have a fund balance, right? We have our rainy day fund. And so we're going to make sure that, over the past couple of years, we've had more money come in than we've spent. So we've built up a nice fund balance. Maybe now we're ready to spend that on our capital project. We might have an endowment that allows us to spend money in that way, or maybe a board designated fund that's been set up that we treat like an endowment, and we can use the funds for this project. Or we might do a capital fundraising campaign, which is going to be a specific fundraising campaign that is going to build or fundraise money specifically for this project. So what's great about equity financing is that, we're not taking out any debt. We're essentially living within our means. But I can tell you it's time consuming. And the way to think about it is, how do you, for those of you who own your own home or, bought your own home and have a 30-year mortgage, how long would it take you to build up enough funds to not have to finance your house, right? To just go in and say, okay, here's the $250,000 I've been saving for X number of years. Now I'm ready to buy a house. That's a really hard thing to do, and it's hard for nonprofits as well, which is why the next type of financing is often the one that we choose. So that type of financing is debt financing. So it's basically, well, we don't have enough money on hand and we'd like to get the asset, or we need to get the asset right now, so we better figure out who can give us money to help make that a reality. So bank loans, we talked about them when we talked about general financing and investments, things like that. Bank loans are really hard for organizations to get on for operating funds, but they are much easier for capital. The idea being that, well, if I'm going to have an asset that I'm going to buy, that can be collateral for the loan. So if I stop paying on the van, well, the bank can come and repossess the van, so to speak. Issuing bonds, your book talks a lot about that. What I will say is it's usually only a technique that's used by very large organizations. Schools often use this, hospitals, that sort of thing. And the reason is they have to be backed by a government entity. It's usually a city or a county. And quite frankly, a city or a county is not going to issue bonds for a small nonprofit that, doesn't have any ties to them. So hence schools, hospitals, larger nonprofits are able to issue usually general obligation bonds, which, if you go back a few, feels like forever, but I guess perhaps it was just last learning module, when we talked about investments and bonds, this is the idea that, well, I'm selling bonds, the public is buying them, and I'm agreeing to pay them back at a certain rate. And in the meantime, I get to use their money for my capital project. Revenue bonds is when the bond is funding a project that is actually generating revenue. The example that they give in the book is toll roads. There's not too many nonprofits out there that, actually generate revenue from whatever it is that they're purchasing. So that's not necessarily something we see a lot of nonprofits do. But, it's certainly something we want to be aware of. So essentially between equity financing and debt financing, I have to figure out how I'm going to go ahead and finance my capital acquisition. And those are my two options. So when you're ready, you can go on to sort of a different topic, which is capital structure.